What up, people? Welcome to another installment of Mike Steph's Wrestlemania Memories. This episode, we'll be tackling Wrestlemania 18, also known as Wrestlemania X8, also known as the return of, some would say, the prodigal son. In my case, it would be the return of the immortal cocksucker. Yes, I said it, Hulk Hogan. Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Now, to give you a little bit of backstory, the main event of this WrestleMania technically was the match between Chris Jericho, the undisputed champion, versus the returning Triple H. Now, shortly after WrestleMania 17, well, shortly before WrestleMania 17, WWF purchased WCW. And shortly after WrestleMania 17, maybe about a month and a half after that, they started integrating some of the WCW wrestlers they had on contract, they had on their roster. But there was a big caveat. A lot of the contracts that they received were from the lower players, the not even mid-card players. All the main event talents had separate contracts, and unless they wanted to buy them out of those separate contracts, those wrestlers weren't included in the deal. Meaning the NWO, Sting, Lex Luger, the whole nine. Even I don't think they wanted Lex Luger back at that time, but neither here nor there. So they were stuck with talent such as Lance Storm, Mike Awesome, to name a few, Chronic. Who else? Now, Diamond Dallas Page did not fall into that mid-card category, but he wanted to go to the show, so he decided to forego millions of dollars to accept the terms of WWF. So did Booker T. And that led to the invasion angle, which they actually had a pay-per-view. But the thing was, they was lacking in pay-per-view talent, main event talent, so they had to combine the forces of WCW and ECW, who had also went under. And not only that, they had to combine the forces and actually use WWF wrestlers that were formerly of ECW to put on the quote-unquote alliance, because they were not able to use the ECW name because it was in litigation. That angle lasted about 5 to 6 months. It culminated at Survivor Series, in which, of course, WWF reigned supreme. During this time, Stone Cold did the unthinkable and turned against WWF and headed the alliance. And then, sure enough, after the Survivor Series, he pretty much morphed back into a babyface. So that leads us to like the pay-per-view before WrestleMania X8, the return of the immortal cocksucker. Not only that, the return, or should I say the invasion of the NWO. But they were framed as old wrestlers who wanted a second chance. Everybody knew they weren't being honest. And you had the original NWO, Hall, Nash, Hulk Hogan. But everybody wanted to see Hulk Hogan. And the roster was pretty much the first week or so was them trying to ingratiate themselves to the roster, saying that all the stories they heard over the last years weren't true. You know, we weren't really trying to put you out of business. We were trying to put WCW out of business, so forth, storyline purposes. But there was an underlying current, because this is the first time you saw Hulk Hogan in a WWF ring in 8 years, since 1993. Matter of fact, 9 years, since 1993. Not only that, this was the first time you saw this iteration of Hulk Hogan. Hollywood Hulk Hogan, the NWO Hulk Hogan in WWF. So there was always a natural curiosity of how this would go. So some people, including myself, thought one of the most natural matchups would be Hulk Hogan versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold had no intention on working with Hulk Hogan. Stone Cold didn't particularly want Hulk Hogan back in the WWF. So therefore, the next dream matchup was Hulk Hogan versus The Rock. And that legitimately was the main event. Not technically, but legitimately, that was what the event was centered around. Hogan versus The Rock. So, with that being said, what was left for Stone Cold? Stone Cold, in interviews since then, has said he was burnt out, he wasn't in a good space, and they pretty much had him on a mid-card match against the returning Scott Hall, the bad guy. But Scott Hall, who was in the middle of fighting his own demons of alcohol and substance abuse and so forth. And Stone Cold wasn't really enamored with that either. No beef against Scott Hall, it's just the fact of, listen, I just came back from this run, from my latest run, in which I turned heel. You had me turn against the federation that I literally made my name for. And because the NWO is coming back, I'm in a mid-card program? Like, what part of the game is that? And he let his thoughts be known. Because this was right around the time WWF started getting involved in the internet, and they had an internet show named Fight This. And Stone Cold went on numerous times to let everybody know, including his bosses, how he thought the creative for his Stone Cold character was, in his terms, piss poor. So that's the backstory. Now, the controversy that's going on with this event was how The Rock realized very quickly that Hulk Hogan wasn't the king of propaganda for nothing. Hold on 1 minute. Hulk Hogan was a politic extraordinaire. And being the fact that this pay-per-view is going to emanate from Toronto, Canada, from the Sky Dome, and the last these people had seen Hulk Hogan in the Sky Dome was way back in Wrestlemania 6. You know, the Ultimate Challenge. And the Canada was such a WWF stronghold. Even though Hulk Hogan was the supposed heel, he was greeted with a hero's welcome. Not only that, look at the heinous things that he did leading up to this. He ran over The Rock with the 18-reeler. The Rock came out with some rib tape, bruised, barely, and he was ready to go. The Rock was in between his Hollywood jaunts. So he was still receiving that same backlash that started at WrestleMania 17. And Hulk Hogan knew how to play the crowd like a fiddle. Now, the match technically wasn't anything to write home about, but the reactions and two artists of their craft, two masters of their craft, played that audience like a fiddle. But The Rock said in passing, you know, sometimes the old dog always has a couple new tricks. And Hulk Hogan effectively turned himself babyface by the end of that match, scuttled not only The Rock's ebbing popularity, or at least on the face side, but also scuttled whatever plans they had for they debuting NWO, because you couldn't have Hulk Hogan as a face and the NWO group as a heel. It wasn't going to work. It didn't work at all. So in the ensuing Monday Night Raw, of course, they had to end up shooting an angle for Hulk Hogan to turn babyface, for the NWO to turn against Hulk Hogan. And that messed up, pretty much the NWO was dead on arrival. Besides that, this really was a one-match card. The main event of Chris Jericho versus Triple H was mid, to be honest. You know, you had Triple H coming off his quad tear from a couple months ago. Well, matter of fact, almost a year ago. He was roided up to the gills. He was like 280, 290 pounds. He wasn't mobile. And they had to follow the extravaganza that was Hogan versus The Rock. You had another match. You had Kane versus Kurt Angle, which was you had Booker T versus Edge, pretty much over a quote-unquote shampoo commercial. What else? You had a four-way tag team match. You had, was it Diamond Dallas Page defending the European title against Christian, I believe. Yeah, the match was, I mean, the card was garbage. But this was also the beginning. Matter of fact, it wasn't the beginning. It was the continuation of the downturn in WWE. Right after WrestleMania X8, they had the debut of Brock Lesnar, the next big thing. Oh, one other thing that happened on WrestleMania X8. Rob Van Dam won his first legitimate WWF Championship in the Intercontinental Championship against William Regal. That was the opening match. Got the crowd hype, and they shuffled Rob Van Dam quickly down the card, because they just, no matter how his popularity was, they did not want to do not a damn thing with Rob Van Dam until it was too late. And then unfortunately, he had this situation in 2006 where they gave him the championship because they were trying to reboot ECW, and unfortunately he got caught with the stash, literally, in his car, and they quickly took the strap from him. But yeah, WrestleMania X8. I remember I was going into this, I was a big Chris Jericho fan. And I mean, I already knew what it was. I already knew they were going to take the title off him because Triple H was back. The real star was back. The only reason Jericho got it was because Rock and Steve Austin had the championship, and pretty much it was just time for them to, I won't say take time off, but it was like, okay, well, who's left? We got Jericho. F it. Let's give it to Jericho. You know, we're in a rebuilding phase anyway, so why not, right? They really did him a disservice, but he always had the claim that he ran for years, that he beat Stone Cold and The Rock in the same night to become the first undisputed champion, which is true.
Slowing down always helps me get inspired.
But yeah, his title reign consisted of him going against The Rock at Royal Rumble, which was a good match. But everybody knew, you know, he was going to win. And going against Steve Austin at No Way Out when the NWO interfered to beat up Stone Cold Steve Austin. So, WrestleMania X8, thumbs in the middle. I haven't been doing thumbs up, thumbs down, or anything, but I mean, it was alright. You know, it wasn't nothing like I thought it was going to be, but at the same time, at that time, you kind of knew everything was starting to head downhill. So, with all that being said, I would check y'all on the next installment of Mike Steph's WrestleMania Memories, in which we'll be talking about WrestleMania 19, which was famous or infamous for the fact that we had the unofficial retirement match of Stone Cold Steve Austin. Yeah. So, with all that being said, I'm gonna get out of here. Until later. Goodbye.